Okay. So can you start out by telling us your name and spelling it for us, please?
Yes, Gerald Vincent Casale, Casale.
And what is your connection to Kent State?
If you're talking specifically about May 4th, 1970, I was a senior there, and I was a member of SDS, and I was in my graduating year at the Honors College, which was a tiny college within a larger college with higher academic standards and a tougher curriculum. And I was in the middle of the action that day, the horror, the chaos.
Can you describe to us your memories of the days leading up to the 4th and the 4th?
You know, what's funny is the days leading up to the 4th, namely that weekend, with all the action in town and the burning of the ROTC building on campus, I only have spotty individual memories of it because I wasn't at all of that action. I certainly was downtown on Saturday night, as most students who liked music and drinking were often. And there was a bar, God, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was a bar where most of the art students hung out, like people involved in studio art, dance, design. And we were some of those people that were herded out of the bar by the cops. We weren't participating in the kind of like spring break type violence on the street, and that's what I'd have to characterize it as. It wasn't as if it was some big organized political action. It was just a general anger, discontent, students with raging hormones mixed with some political ideas, conflicting with authority figures who were despicable, low, and inciting kids to go further so that they could do what they wanted to do to them, which was arrest them, hurt them, because they hated them. It was basically a civil war. So I remember some of that and fighting to try to get home and stay out of jail on that Saturday night. I remember somebody going, "Oh my God, the ROTC building's on fire. Let's go see what's going on," and driving up there and having it surrounded by the fire department and cops, and sure enough, these old wooden structures were in flames. But there's no cohesive narrative there for me. I was somewhat seriously politicized by virtue of being a member of SDS. And these things that were going on were spontaneous and out of control, and they weren't actionable on an SDS level because SDS actually had some discipline and some modus operandi that involved a certain level of analysis and of planning. So on Sunday I stayed home because it was just ugly and I didn't want that kind of trouble. I didn't need that kind of trouble. And as I said, I was in my senior year trying to complete all my studio art pieces to be able to graduate. So when we all saw the news that night, the national news, whatever it was, NBC, ABC, CBS, that was it. That's all we had. And they all gleefully proclaimed Nixon's bombardment of Cambodia and the expansion of the war into Cambodia. I knew even before making a phone call, and certainly this was phone calls before cell phones, that there would be some serious problem on campus Monday, that we wouldn't be going to classes, that this would not be business as usual, because this was another breach. This was just a further kind of escalation of kind of corrupt government and Nixon trying to dissolve the separation of powers within our government. And so sure enough, Monday morning, that's when I remember everything, from all the meetings in the student union and cafeteria about this and about what are we going to do, what it means, to the decision to hold a rally, to the discussions that we knew the Guard were in town, what would they do. We all thought Governor Rhodes had declared martial law because he made the implication he had. We knew that martial law suspended First Amendment rights, but thought that was just completely a bogus tactic. And then the decision was made to hold the rally based on Nixon's actions, hold the rally at noon on the Commons, ring the bell, and the speeches started. And it didn't take long for the Guard, who had been off campus and in some cases hiding on campus in the gymnasium and in the heating plant, to converge. Clearly, in retrospect, this was a setup. All of us naive students were playing right into a completely planned ambush. And the Guard basically surrounded us on three sides, limiting our movement so that we couldn't really leave campus by heading towards the front edge of campus to get off quickly. And they ordered us to disperse. And then, of course, as you've heard over and over, everybody's recollections are pretty clear here and pretty consistent, which is that the students were like, pigs off campus, fuck you, this, that. Looking to defy these people that they clearly hated as much as those people hated us. And within maybe, 10 minutes of the order to disperse, then the tear gas started. And then both the vehicles and on foot with soldiers, they were able to herd us like cattle over the hill towards what was then the journalism building, which now is the architecture building, Taylor Hall, whatever. And there was only one path up there. You get up there to the top of the hill, and then you were forced to turn to your left and go back down the hill towards the gymnasium or the parking lot, which was the student-teacher parking lot at that time. And so a lot of faint-of-heart people decided to try to start getting off campus that way to try to escape. And there were a lot of other kids who were just voyeurs watching, like, look, here's a big protest, what's going on? They come out of class, they're on that level of Taylor Hall that's like a huge patio, because the ground there is, the footprint of the ground there is terraced. And we're all kind of watching. It's a ritual, it's a game. You think they have bayonets and tear gas. You don't think they have live ammunition in their M1 rifles. So the more activist of us aren't trying to escape anymore. We're just trying to play cat and mouse with them. And again, well known, they push us down towards the practice football field, and then they circle around and they retrace their steps and they come back up the hill. And it all looks like Army games. It's kind of almost laughable. And they've stopped shooting tear gas, and students are more or less in a waiting position. Soldiers, a whole battalion of them, come up the hill, and I was positioned to the left, which I guess, I'm not sure about the orientation, east, west, south, north. I guess that would have been southwest of Taylor Hall, but quite far up, like within viewing distance of that pagoda where it's clearly in my vision. And most of the students were behind the group I was with. They were either down the hill in the parking lot where Alison Krauss was shot, or on the access road to the gymnasium where Jeffrey Miller ends up laying dead. And what I can't understand and don't understand, although it was suggested today why, the guard, this, like 12 of them, or apparently 12, it certainly looked like more to me then, but they stop, and I see one of their guardsmen in a gas mask to the side of them at a right angle, and he's yelling, and I don't know what he's saying, just chaos and fear. And he makes a gesture. This is what I see. And I see them turn. And my friends and I are wondering, what are they going to do now? Now they're going to come back down the hill and charge us with their bayonets? Because they were lowering their bayonets. And they don't advance. They just stand there. And then the next thing I know, I'm just staring at them as they shoot. And I'm much closer to them than where Jeffrey was or Allison was. And it takes about 3 seconds to realize it was live ammo and everybody's screaming and there's wailing and screaming. And I turn around and that's when I see Allison over my left shoulder. I didn't know it was her yet. That turned out to be her. And then people are screaming, Jeffrey, and I knew Jeffrey, and I looked down, he's face down, and the blood's running down the sidewalk, and it was basically in that time frame of the famous picture with Mary Lou Vecchio. Although I don't remember seeing her when I saw his body and bleeding. I don't think she was in her position yet. And I couldn't understand, why did they shoot past us who were closer to them, over our heads, down the hill, and shoot at people who were either A, just watching, B, trying to get the hell out of there, going to that parking lot to get in their cars, or C, all the way over where Jeffrey was, which was in nowhere near a threatening position. Anyway, it was suggested today that when they had been down near the practice football field, that Jeffrey was among the group of people who had been most aggressive at yelling back at them and trying to throw the tear gas back at them, and that possibly they shot back towards those kids because they had had an encounter with them and had a beef against them and wanted to get them. At any rate, I find all that, in a way, a black hole in space, unsatisfying. You'll never know. It doesn't matter, because we're dealing with unarmed students, and nothing they were doing in any way, shape, or form warranted them dying. This is just a non-discussion there. This is a hideous act. They basically got away with murder. And that's why I said in my speech today, there's never been any justice. Because no one's ever had to be accountable. It's never been called murder. The pittance that the family's got is an insult, slap in the face. And no one understands just the degree of the injustice and the terror there was that day. So that is what I remember and how I view it.
How did your experience at Kent that day impact your life?
The first thing that happened to me when I realized that there were students shot with M1 ammunition, dying or dead, and you're seeing real blood running down the sidewalk, and you're seeing real exit wounds, and it's not Hollywood TV movie violence. I got sick to my stomach, my knees buckled, and I fell down on the grass. That's the first thing that happened to me. I lost it. And I went into slow motion, like in a car crash. Like, sound wasn't real. People weren't moving in real time. Everything gets compressed, like Raging Bull when Jake LaMotta's getting hit, And I sat there in terror for 2 hours, feeling like I was going to vomit. And myself, along with hundreds of students, then were herded off campus with the help of the teachers who were protest monitors. They had the black armbands on, but the guardsmen had formed basically an exit pass that went down to the corner of whatever that is, Water and South Lincoln, where the old gates were, and marched us double file off campus. And that would be the last time I walked onto campus. In 3 months, it became a lockdown crime scene occupied by the National Guard. And I was forced to walk all the way home, 4 miles away, west on Water Street. And by that time, news had broke out, and locals, hideous locals like hillbillies, had been deputized by the sheriff's department and the police department, and they were patrolling in like unmarked, like regular civilian cars, like, you know, Chevy Biscaynes, you know, with black wall tires, and these guys would drive by you and have guns, point them at you out the window. Get off the street, fucking hippie, you know. I mean, you were shitting your pants. It was terror. Get home to the apartment, you know, just feeling safe to be alive. And then the town was in a curfew for like a week, and helicopters patrolled every half hour from the east to the west side of Kent, and students weren't allowed out after 7. And until that point, to that day, I had been, I mean, certainly I had a high enough IQ to have gotten a scholarship in the honors college, and certainly I knew that in a democracy there was plenty of hypocrisy. But I suppose I was hippie in a sense that I thought that at the heart of it all there was something solid and basically good, and there were always people who didn't respect rights or democracy trying to erode the freedoms we had, but they were just the bad apples. That there was an inherent goodness, you know. So I went from Mr. Peace and Love to no more Mr. Nice Guy pretty quick. And when Stephen Stills sang that song with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young about how he almost cut his hair, well, I did. And I chopped it off. I drove to Cleveland and went to one of the black community pimp stores and bought tight stove leg pants and a black leather 3/4 inch jacket, length jacket. I didn't want anything I was wearing or anything I had anymore. And so I got very, very angry. I mean, had I been wired a little differently, had I not been a really creative person, had I not had an outlet to maybe express it through music or art, I probably would have joined the Weather Underground. That's probably what I would have done. I wanted to kill him. It was upside down. I mean, really. And I mean, certainly one viable or seemingly viable alternative was to seek revenge, get them. Because you realize there is no justice. It's all a big lie. Brute power wins. The media controls the story. You can check the records. Akron Beacon Journal, especially the Record Courier, the Kent paper. Headline that night, May 4th, students shoot guardsmen. Locals thought students had hurt or killed guardsmen and were out to go get students. None of the accounts that came out were even close to accurate. They were all complete propaganda, for the powers that be to spin the students as hardcore political activists, commies, outside agitators hired by SDS, brought in from out of state, just the horror and scare, the fear tactics. So I don't think I would have started the band Devo. I really don't, had it not been for what happened to me that day. And within 2 years, my friends and I had the name Devo, and we had an idea for a band, and it was conceptual. And it was not about nothing. It wasn't about doing drugs and whining about not getting laid or singing a rock song about getting laid. It was serious content, serious issues. Started getting serious about it on a daily basis in 1973, and became my obsession then. And by 1975, we had a working band that could go play live with a body of work. And we were getting laughed at, and we were getting bottles of beer and other things thrown at us, and we were getting hated. But that only made us feel like we were on the right track. Because having had the experience I had of being, I think, on the right side of an issue all the way back, and having that spun as being the bad guy, then it makes it easy to not be some whining little hippie that, oh, they didn't like me, I'm so sensitive, I just want to make art that people like. You know, it's like, no, it's like, look who's hating us, morons. This is good. So it just fueled our resolve. And I see the connection. I see the timeline between 1970 and 75 and ultimately 76 when we go out to Los Angeles and start playing in the clubs, in the punk clubs. And then we played there for a year, and eventually every label started coming to see us until there was a bidding war, and we got signed. So, I mean, it took, you know, a long journey, but it turned around.
In what ways has what happened at Kent stayed with you over the years?
Oh my God. Everything I brought up in my speech today made me feel like I was having either A, a panic attack, or B, a acid flashback. It really stays with you. That's all I can say. It's got to stay with you the way that you would expect anything to stay with anyone who has been totally traumatized and victimized. You know, whether it's Bosnia, Sudan, you know, the Holocaust, name it. There's so many Holocausts and horror stories to name on this planet. I mean, the history of this planet is the history of humans being inhumane to other groups of humans, slaughter, killers, murderers. That's history. And sometimes, when they're parts of empires and they win, they seem like heroes in the history books, oddly enough, because guess who wrote them? I mean, look what Australia did to the Aborigines. Look what we did to the American Indians. And it just goes on. And look at Sudan, Darfur. It just goes on and on and on. Pol Pot, you know, in Cambodia. You often feel like the character of Marlon Brando's Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, where he meets up with Dennis Hopper in the cave and he goes, the horror. It's like you feel numbed and shut down. You realize there is no justice. There really isn't. And there's really no outside reason to be good or take the high road. The only reason to do that is by a personal choice. But if you expect a reward for that, you're really a liberal moron. Because you're just going to invite people to want to kill you. Because evil rules.
What does it mean for you to be back here on the 40th?
It's each hour I spend here, it means more and more. Being able to talk to all the people I haven't seen, some of which I haven't seen in 40 years, some of which I haven't seen in 30 or 20 years, and they're all here together. And the fact that despite everything I know about how society works, and everything I know about how control of the media spins the importance of any event in history, they haven't been able to kill this. I'm alive right here today, and I couldn't even believe how many people at this point in time, 40 years later, were out in the commons paying any attention whatsoever, that there was any press, that now, luckily, with the internet, and with the instant dissemination of that information unfiltered, and YouTube, that there is what I've always hoped for and what I tried to emphasize in my speech, which is a whole new audience of 20-year-olds who have to know what happened, and not in some silly way about learning historical details, because that makes it like history class that no kid ever likes. But if you present history in the true way history should be presented, which is, this is just the story of human nature, and it never stops. And people either learn from history or they repeat it. That makes it totally exciting. And that's what I saw the possibility of today. That they get it, that it's an ongoing struggle, just as democracy was an idea 200 and some years ago. And somebody had to fight for it. And then other people come along and try to twist it and use it and tamp it down and declaw it. And if you're not aware of why you're supposed to do this or what the idea was, you can forget the idea and it'll be gone. You know, it's like anything. I don't care. Try to start a band and you have an idea, right? And then one guy quits the band and then a new guy comes in and he didn't share any of those ideas. And if he's charismatic enough, he can just waste that idea and take everybody going this direction. That's the same thing with democracy. You could do that easily. And it's being done now more slickly than ever. I mean, the techniques are better than ever. I mean, the kind of McCarthy-esque tactics and doublethink that Fox News uses with their sound bites. They're all on that level of like, when did you stop beating your wife? Or, do you still beat your wife? And you go, no. And they go, when did you stop? You know, it's like every question is a leading question and you're in the hole before you start. And then they chop it up and just show the bit that they want the public to buy. So they can make anybody that advances any given position, politically or otherwise, look foolish. You know, look dumb. And they can find the best guy for their position, you know, the best salesman, and give him more airtime. And control the circumstances of what the crowd reaction is, where he appears, how good the mic sounds. There's total control now. There's less freedom and more groupthink and less privacy than ever. I really think that soon America will be more like going to the airport. You know your experience of going to the airport, where you feel like maybe you're in a minimum security prison, and you feel like at any given point, if somebody decides they don't like the way you're acting, or the way you opened your water bottle at the Hudson News, or what you said and the question you asked in the security line, you're going down. Everybody's just obeying. They're willing to stand in the long lines. They're willing to shut up. They know they can't say anything that anybody can hear in terms of complaining. They can't question the techniques. And they're just relieved to get through. They feel like they really won when they get to sit in their seat and get nothing and pay overpriced amounts for water and bad snacks, junk food. So I really think that if you extrapolate from the airport, pretty soon whole towns will just work like the airport. Whole cities will work like the airport. And we've lost a lot of freedom. As much violence and as much corruption as there was in 1970, there was a defiant and informed part of the population who wanted to protect their democratic rights as they saw them. Why? Because they were aware. They had learned in school about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They had learned how the law is supposed to work. So they have a framework for judging how far afield something's gone. But now, I mean, we might as well be a banana republic in America. It's really run like that.
Why do you think it's important that young people learn about what happened at Kent?
Because they're the only ones that can do anything about the future. They're the only ones that have the energy and the lack of fear, hopefully, And nothing to lose, by the way.
Well, thank you so much for coming in
Okay,
and sharing this with us.
all right.